In this edition of Wellbeing at Work, how do you overcome the conflicting pressures of having a career and getting a life? We'll be telling the story and hearing the words of one teacher who became overwhelmed by work and her desire to impress. As we follow her experiences, our panellists give their advice on what you can do to maintain a healthy work-life balance. They are Anna Essex from Teacher Support Network, Victoria Galbraith, a counselling psychologist, and Richard Gerver, once a head teacher, now an education and creativity consultant. If you're watching this on the Teachers TV website, there's direct access to extended discussions and extra video tips from the panel. Although the dramatisations in this programme are based on a true story, we're not, of course, using the actual people or school involved.
Well, welcome to the family.
I had finished training and had braced myself for my first year. I liked the school and soon made some good friends.
And also to my deputy head teacher.
I was assigned the deputy head as my mentor.
Anytime you need anything, just come and see me. My door is always open.
She was great. She found plenty of time to talk. So Chamberlain stood down as Prime Minister. The first few weeks were okay, to be honest. But then it all started getting too much. They were all pretty good kids, but I was finding it difficult to get everything I planned in lessons done, either because there was something silly or I had to go over things more than once. Has everyone heard of Churchill?
Oh, yes!
Be serious! Be serious! No wonder you're behind. The deputy head gradually seemed less and less bothered about seeing me and understanding my problems.
I know you're new, and I've made allowances.
Eventually, she actually said I should sort out my own problems. It was up to me to
take responsibility.
And then she told me
that this is the job you've signed up for. It's no walk in the park.
I think the tragedy is so many teachers come into the profession passionate, committed, they're desperate to make their mark and do a good job. And as a result, they put unnecessary pressure on themselves. And one of the greatest roles that a mentor can have is actually to talk that teacher through the fact that they just want them to revel in the enjoyment of the job in those first days, in those first few months, to enjoy being involved with young people, with the children, to celebrate the qualifications they have.
Teachers really want to instil hope and inspiration in their children, in their pupils, and it can be very difficult if they feel that actually I'm feeling really stressed out here and I'm finding it very difficult to cope.
That's right. I mean, there are very few other professions where you are constantly on show from the minute you walk through the school gates to the end of the day, where the expectation is that you will be inspiring and interesting and passionate about what you're doing. And there's very few other professions where you are right there in front of people all day long. And
I think one of the problems is that the deputy head needs to remember what that feels like. They need to remember that burst of commitment when you first walk through the doors as a newly qualified teacher, and realise that this teacher actually may well be tying themselves in knots, but they're doing it for the best interests of the school and the children.
Sure. And for the teacher, perhaps the teacher could be reflecting on what's happening to them on a daily basis, so that then they can actually put into practice something that they've learnt from the previous day into the following day and subsequent days and weeks and months, and as time goes on, as time progresses, perhaps they will find it much more able to cope.
It's very easy to get overwhelmed by everything that's going on in that sort of first part of the teaching year. I was with a group of NQTs recently who were saying, well, I'm not going to have a life this year, I already know that. Well, there needs to be some balance. You can't just throw yourself completely into work. It's not healthy for anybody. But you're right, some kind of reflection and understanding of how stress affects each teacher and then what they can do about that's really important if they're going to survive this year.
Shall we see what else happens next?
Right, OK, so C9, everyone. Is everyone on page 53 in the book?
What about my costumes?
Things weren't getting any better. I rang up Teacher Support Network and talked things through. It made me realise that I'd probably been volunteering for just about everything going in order to make a good impression. I was staying on at the school until 7 or 8 most nights, doing other stuff with the pupils of colleagues.
Please, everyone, C9, the record shop!
and then I'd go home and start preparing and marking. My boyfriend was great, but at one point he said,
"Just show them what you're capable of."
This made me think, well, I'll just work harder and harder and they'll see what I can do.
The boyfriend stepped in and he's tried, I think, to offer the support and guidance to his girlfriend. But actually, to an extent, you can't blame him maybe for giving the wrong advice. You know, the instinct, go work harder, go prove it to them, girl, kind of has the best interests at heart. But in many ways, that's only going to exacerbate the problem, isn't it?
That's right. It's not his fault. It's a real shame. But he has a very subjective viewpoint of the situation. He's involved with his girlfriend, very concerned for her, but at the same time feels actually, you know, this girl can do well.
I think eagerness to say yes means you end up being overwhelmed with work, and that can lead to further problems. So I think taking a step back actually and trying to do a bit less would probably be better than just going for it and trying to do more.
I was going to say, it's often a pattern, isn't it, of people who are finding themselves in a spiral of decline in terms of stress and pressure. The inability to step back and see things objectively. And of course, teaching is one of those professions that is so emotive and so in the moment, and it's so much about people, that ability to move from the subjective into the objective is really tough. And when times get hard, we tend to take things more and more personally, and then are less able to think strategically about the fact that, wait a minute, this is a job, and I need to think objectively, and I need to seek objective advice to find the solution for this problem.
Sure, absolutely. I think often with teaching it can be very, very difficult to say no. I think you're absolutely right. And taking a step back is incredibly important, and thinking, actually, if I say yes here, am I going to be doing myself more harm than good? It can be very, very beneficial for a career to say yes often, but having said that, for somebody's emotional and mental health, it can be very, very difficult in many ways to be saying yes all the time.
I think that's true of teachers, whether they're newly qualified or they've been in the job for 30 years. That thing, I will do the after-school club, I will take the children on a school trip over the half-term, I will go in at the weekend and finish off that piece of work. And because you're educating young people, and that's a really exciting and really worthwhile thing to be doing, but doing it 24/7 takes its toll.
The workload was really taking its toll. I was moody all the time.
Hey, yeah, fancy going for a drink?
And this work will mark itself, will it?
Sorry.
I was becoming such a bitch at home. All I could think about was what I had to do the next day at work. And then the fear that older teachers were in the staff room talking about me.
She's just not strong enough.
She's just not good enough.
She's no teacher. She hasn't got it.
What we've seen here is not unusual, is it? A work problem, something which started as an issue at work, is becoming an issue at home as well. You can see there that she's taking her problems home with her, and that's causing problems with her boyfriend.
And if a person is feeling at work that they're struggling, and at home that they're also struggling and having a really hard time of it, it can be very easy to get sort of caught up in the whole stress aspect. It can often lead to something which is termed burnout, where people are actually finding it very, very difficult to cope. Not so much that it's just work-related, but difficult to cope generally, and find it very, very difficult to sort of motivate themselves and feel, you know, what do I do here? How do I help myself?
I think often teachers consider themselves to be teachers rather than a person who happens to be a teacher. And I think it's important that they have a bit of perspective and look at the other things in life that are important and spend a bit of time working on those things as well. And that's, you know, looking at work-life balance and getting that into perspective is a really important step for people.
And maybe a conversation between her and her partner to say, you know, when I get really self-absorbed, you have permission to physically drag me out of the house and take me down to the pub or insist we go to the cinema. And it's important that she feels confident enough and he feels confident enough in their relationship that he can do that.
Eventually, I decided I had to find the courage to speak directly to the head teacher. So, as we've discussed, I was assigned a new mentor, and I started to devote Thursday and Friday evenings and Sundays to myself. No work under any circumstances. This really helped me relax and sort things out at home and in the classroom. That's when Chamberlain resigned. Let's get back to Churchill, shall we? And if anyone says, oh yes, they can have a detention.
I think to her credit, she showed remarkable maturity and courage, actually, because she was able to take the issue back up the ladder, if you like, in the school, directly to the head teacher. But at the same time, my concern would be for other teachers who maybe don't feel in the same position, because it's one of those cases, isn't it, with teachers? One of the reasons they bottle a lot up inside is they don't want to feel that they're being weak or failing. And the worse the situation becomes, the more they project that onto themselves and feel they must be doing wrong, they must be failing, they must be weak. And actually then sharing that with anyone is tough.
You're right, that is the particular thing about teaching, is that there's that expectation that I must be perfect at all times. So being afraid to ask for help is a really big problem in teaching. And I think it's down to actually the head teacher and the senior leadership team to actually instill a culture within the school which says it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to come to us and say you're finding something a bit difficult, because we're here to support you. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, and so there are other places that teachers can go to. If she hadn't been able to speak to the head teacher, she could have phoned up the teacher support line and got some support there, maybe spoken to her union rep, not because she wanted to take any action, but just because they've got a lot of experience about how to tackle these sorts of things.
I think the point that you make about perfection is absolutely important. I think often if a person is striving for perfection, which is often what people do if they're career-minded and they see their hopes and goals and their dreams out there, I really want to achieve this, they can really strive for perfection. And is anyone actually perfect? Do we ever know anybody that is actually perfect? But if you're constantly striving for that perfection and not achieving it, it can be very overwhelming. It can really cause somebody to really suffer, distress.
There's an onus on local authorities here too, because some good local authorities will still run programmes and opportunities for newly qualified teachers in their authority to come out, have a cup of coffee, have a conversation and share those anxieties and experiences with each other. And they can be hugely effective. Now, if it's a large school, one strategy that can be easy to develop and something that maybe those schools should consider is having an internal support network where in the time they have legally for non-contact time, those newly qualified teachers can sit down together and share those experiences, because when teachers sit down and realise they're all feeling the same way, and of course that immediately takes some of the pressure off the emotional impact.
Sure, that isolation can be very, very difficult for somebody to experience if they're thinking, I'm on my own in this, I'm the only person who's going through this. But actually, as you say, so many other people will also be feeling the same, and as a consequence, absolutely a support network would be so beneficial.
It's a cliche, but it's true, isn't it? A problem shared is a problem halved, and it's really important that whoever you are in whatever walk of life, something's bothering you, it's really important to find someone you trust who you can talk to about it.
Absolutely.
Whether it's a professional or whether it's a friend or colleague.
That's right.
We must end the programme there, I'm afraid. But please don't forget that you can see extended versions of our conversations and further advice and support from each of us on the Teachers TV website, teachers.tv/wellbeing.